amazing music. Great. We'll take a break in our Jesus Game Plan series to be talking about the Beatitudes in the weeks to come. And so we're transitioning with this last piece of the Jesus Game Plan in terms of children and where that fits. And then we're going to talk a little more about that as our children will join us towards the end of the service, and we'll move on into communion. So just an opening story. A man named Charles Francis Adams, a 19th century politician, figure, diplomat, kept a diary. And this was a reading out of his diary. You can still find this today in the museum where this is located. And it says, and it's turned to this page, by the way, and it says this: "Went fishing with my son today, a day completely wasted." In the diary for the day. Interestingly enough, his son, Adam, also kept a diary. And next to his father's diary is his son's diary, with this entry, same day. "Went fishing with my dad today. Most wonderful day of my life." It's not always the way it seems. Stuff that's going on, and the way in which we interact, or even the way in which we're experiencing something right now, may not be what's really happening. This is what's so important about a life of faith. A life of faith draws us into something well beyond our feelings. If it were all about our feelings, we would quit way too soon. We would find ourselves not in the place where we need to be. So your question this morning, our opening is this: how do we welcome the next generation? What is the plan for filling the seats of the next generation of people who are to come to this place? So some of us could say, well, they'll just kind of bumble on in like I did. Or they'll just kind of find it by accident. They'll find their way, God will lead them. And yeah, I guess there's some truth to all that. But it's important before we look at the next generation to also look at this current generation. And one of our outstanding spokesmen, the Dr. Reverend Billy Graham, in the last years of his active ministry, when he was drawing huge stadium crowds, began to say more and more to these crowds, and has since done that, since he's pulled away from that ministry altogether. He says this, that the next generation will not find Jesus Christ the way this generation found Jesus Christ. And of course, he could point to his own life. He was a squirrely junior hire sitting on the back of a hay bale in a tent that was pitched on the other side of the tracks at the edge of town, and some preacher barking away at the front. And he came to the Lord in a tent revival, sawdust and all. But that's not how he reached people. Billy Graham has said that's not how we're going to reach the next generation. So a couple of uncomfortable questions for us. I'm going to put this in the form of a question, but it's now a widely known statistic in the church. So I'll put it in this form. Why does the church mean so little to the next generation? This is a disturbing question for those of us who have been at it for a long time. Why aren't they here? What's going on? A little more unsettlement. You kind of have to mix it all up before we get to where we're going. Do we resent the next generation because they don't appreciate our church or the way we do church? Have we been holding on to our church for ourselves? Or are we sharing the church of Jesus Christ with our children? What are we doing? The question, or I should say the three questions that this passage calls to us to answer are along this line. And the first is this: Where do children fit in the game plan? So Jesus' story starts with this. People were bringing little children to Jesus to have him touch them, but the disciples rebuked them. And Jesus saw this, or when Jesus saw this, he was indignant. Okay, so where do children fit? There's actually three answers according to the main three characters in the passage. The first is the parents. The parents and the adults that care about children are saying, hey, where do kids fit? We don't know. We're bringing them to Jesus. We've had them all day. We're here in this. What is this? Now, the optimum word there, if you wanted to circle a word as we just kind of go through this verse by verse, word by word, is the word bringing little children. You see, bringing means, come along with me, I will care for you. Here's what we've become accustomed to in the church in the modern age. We've become accustomed to sending. So we send our children, and that means away from me over there. And we'll try to get someone who can hang out with you while we're over here being adults. Interesting, isn't it? A sending instead of a bringing. Well, the next group to try to answer the question where the children fit is a rebuke. The disciples are rebuking them. Who is the them? It's the adults. They're not quite getting down on the children, but they're getting down on the adults. Jesus and us are way too busy to be messing with kids today. Okay? So they kind of agree with the send them away. Do something else. You got it? Send them away. Jesus' commentary to the whole thing is that when Jesus saw this, he was indignant. The word indignant here literally means displeased and against the whole concept of sending children away. Don't like that. That's not a good concept. Okay? Morning, Dave. Good to have you here. Yeah, right in the front row. I always get a personal greeting anyone that sits on the front row. Just stop that soon. The point here is very simple, but boy, has it got lost in the layers, hasn't it? The point is this: Jesus sees children as a priority to be nurtured, not a program to be managed. And I think that's part of where we all are, in a way. No one wants to go manage a program with children. But if I could be like Jesus and nurture true, good, whole life, why wouldn't I do that? Puts a different spin on it, doesn't it? Second question is this: why do children matter? There's some obvious answers here. But once again, now Jesus is speaking. Let the little children come unto me. Verse 14b. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Now your key word here is belongs. It belongs to them. That's pretty powerful language. I don't know if you've considered that. We'll talk about that. You see, children matter because they are the future of the church. The church is for children whether we give it to them or not. It belongs. They are the rightful deed holders. They may not sit on the trustee board. They may not even sit in the CLB, and decide what they're going to be taught. But they are the rightful belongers to this whole thing. It belongs to them. Jesus might go as far as to say to us, it belonged to you for a while, and you can still share it if you share it with them, but it really, you've had your time. Not that God's done with any of us. But this is Jesus speaking to, this isn't like one of those kind of Sunday school lesson things, flannel board and all that stuff. This is Jesus talking to us today. We're answering the question, why aren't they interested in church? Well, maybe this is the answer. In fact, I'm sure it is. The second part of why children matter is because the children are us. Okay? We must become like children, or we don't enter either. Wouldn't that be a travesty if we were holding all the church to ourselves and all it was an institution and a bunch of club things that we like to do, and so while we held it to ourselves and never gave it to the children, we didn't have it either. Wow, what about that? What if all we had were our preferences and our things and all of our stuff that we like to do? Ever got a hold of Jesus? Jesus says become vulnerable, needy, ask questions, be teachable, be humble, be grateful, willing to believe and trust and have faith. These are all the good qualities of kids. By the way, I got a list of all the bad qualities too. That's not what Jesus is talking about here. You haven't met my grandson. Some of you have. I think they have over there when we've sent him there. Okay? So that's, yeah. But these qualities that those of us kind of in the adult realm really don't appreciate very much. Neediness and asking questions and directions and vulnerability. Please teach me. Not high on our list. So I want to use a little bit of imagination for a moment. If it helps, you can close your eyes for a minute, but not too long. I'm going to have to wake you up. I might have to clap my hands. And I want you to think for a moment. This, by the way, is not the Nigerian letter, okay? So the Nigerian email. This is something entirely different. Think for a moment that you have received a letter from a long-lost relative that you didn't know you had, and you are entitled to a large inheritance. Wow, yeah, very good. That was clever, wasn't it? So, here it is. You've got, and don't think too long about that, because maybe you've already descended into all the things that you would buy with that and everything. But here's what I want you to consider. You're sitting there with the letter on your lap, the largest inheritance. It's all yours. And I want to tell you that you will never receive what belongs to you if, A, it is stolen from you. A bunch of lawyers, the government, some family members that you didn't know you had. They had a counter letter, and it all gets scrambled up and stuff. And by the time it's all over, you still owe the lawyers more, and all the inheritance is gone. It's stolen. It was never given to you. Or you rejected the inheritance because you would not fulfill the demands that required your receiving it. Don't you see Jesus' point here? You see, the children may never receive the church because even though it belongs to them, if we withhold their presence and their life and their place in the church, not give them their own church, the church. And you and I could easily forfeit the benefits that we have left of the church if we reject it because we're so unwilling to be needy and ask questions and be vulnerable and teachable, and we're unwilling to share it with anyone else. Because the it that we're not willing to share isn't any of the things that God's concerned about anyway. It's mostly our stuff that we've attached to it, and we call that church. The third question comes out of the last verse. And he took the children into his arms, and he put his hands on them, and he blessed them. How then shall we act? How shall we act? Well, the two things that Jesus did, and I hear a lot of people talking about, boy, I just want to be like Jesus, is that he did two things. He touched these kids and he blessed them. It was a physicality of Jesus' time, talent, treasure, and testimony that fed directly into the lives of these children. He gave himself. He stopped. Can you imagine that? God, who creates the earth, stops time to have grubby kids with chocolate all over their face get in his lap and make that white blue robe that we imagine him wearing, all smeared with chocolate and raisins and stuff. Lasagna. Kids do with food. It's just everywhere. Comes out of everywhere. You know what I mean? Jesus is all there. There's no such thing as Pampers in the first century. Things that were disturbing. Situations that just pushed people off. But not Jesus. He kissed a leper and touched for healing to take place. You see, it's hands-on. It's real hands-on work here. Blessing is something that we give away, and it's not just something that you can afford. It's not a blessing if you can afford to give it away. That's called extra. I don't need it. I couldn't eat it all anyway. It's blessing when you look down and you'd really like to eat that, and you see someone just 2 steps hungrier than you, and you pass them the plate. You sacrificed something. It's not, Jesus isn't talking about the leftover here. He's talking about the first fruits, the sacrifice, the specific. And that not all sacrifice, according to Jesus, if you looked at when they ate meals and he didn't, he said, I don't need to eat. I've got the joy of the Lord. I'm so full of what God has done in me today. Blessing our children in the here and now. So the application question is simply this: where are you and I making a hands-on, personal, joyful sacrifice to bless our children here and now? Just want you to think about that for a minute. And this comes in all packages and in all sizes. I mean, it does mean your own children. It does mean your own grandchildren. It does mean the kids in the neighborhood or people that you see in a variety of different ways. But it also means this incredible sense of coming to what Jesus would have us do in our own situation. The survival of the church isn't what those who are not in church think about this. The survival of the church is about us living a compelling, attractive Christian life that people want to have a share in. If I was so sure that we were doing everything right, that would be great. Then we could castigate those who aren't here. Get right or get left, whatever. But there's something that Jesus is talking about that is deeper. Who is it? Just to continue to kind of broaden your list just a bit. Who is it in the next generation that you could be dealing with? How is it that you could be doing that in this place? I'm going to give you some really good ideas. We're going to be doing that this summer together. And then just one last piece of meditation for you. I would encourage you to think about someone, or because of someone's life, you're in the church. How did we get here? What's happened in our hearts? What's happened in our lives that has brought us here? Who is the person who reached you for Jesus? And even if it was someone who was semi-obligated to do that, like a parent or a grandparent, you must know, if you take the time to look back, that they had to sacrifice to do that, along with everything else that they did and every other way in which they were the people that they said they were when they came to you. Now, if all goes well, we should be having kids arrive at any moment. We really surprised them, didn't I, when I said I'd be done at 11:30. Nah, not fast enough, Jeff. No way, no how. But let me talk to you a little bit about, I want to do something with the kids once they get here, but let me talk to you a little bit about what we have in store for you for the next 7 weeks. For the next 7 weeks, we're going to be taking this service, and we're going to begin with the children with us. So if you have children that are usually over in the kids zone, you'll still check them in there, but if you show up late, or if you have children visiting your children, or you have grandchildren or something like that and they're with you, they can just sit with you until the time kind of opens up. But the children will start the service with us. We will be worshiping together. We'll have a time in which we do a kids talk together. We'll also have a time in which we do this thing called the mystery box, which you're just going to have to come next week and figure that out. There will be a teaching time for the adults and for the kids. At that point, the kids will leave for about that 15-minute period, and then when they come back in, that means the adults will be done with that time. And then we'll do some sharing. What have we learned for the day? We'll kind of be with each other. We've got some fun videos, and we also have some other kinds of object lessons ready for us. There goes Pastor Dave. He can rescue me. Go get him, Dave. So that's where we want to go. But this morning, we want to bring them in. We want to get them started because it's all I got to do. You know, when you just we always found out if we were expecting company to come to our house, if we looked out the window, that didn't work. But if you just stepped out into the front yard, you would find it. So some of these kids are going to find you. Yeah, they're looking for mom and dad. So they're going to. This is great. So, before we get the rest of the servers, I'm going to call the communion servers down. And hey, Dad, how's it going? Good. Hey, breathless. So the key to this morning is doing communion with our kids. And so I've got some helpful hints for you. We're going to talk about how that works, I think. I'm not sure that I got my little...